You've actually known Ryan longer than any of us around here. The opportunity to get back and work together, how appealing was that for you?
Very. You know, there's a learning curve when you take a new job, when you come into a new place. And so having history with him, you know, kind of growing up in the business a little bit and knowing his vision and things that he had, it's going to make it a lot easier that way. And just excited, honestly, just to get back and closer to home for me and my family, and then him running the programs. Was very enticing.
Has he changed at all since the last time?
Nah, that's the best part about it. When I saw him in front of the meeting room, I mean, he is who he is. He has the room, he has the kids, and you know, they have him. And so, yeah, to him to become a head guy and then take the head coach bill and change, no, I didn't see any of that, you know. But saw growth, you know, on the flip side. I mean, he's taken that role on really well. It's been fun to see, you know, working for him right now.
Was this a tough decision for you, Justin, or was this a pretty easy decision once Coach Day
both.
reached out to you?
I mean, on paper, you look at it like it's a no-brainer, right? But in recruiting, in development, and a lot of these things, that's why college football is so awesome, because it's still intimate with these kids. And so you're in the living room with their parents, you're recruiting them, you talk about what you're going to do, and then having 4 years of those guys, like you take ownership in your room. You're the general manager of your room, so those are your guys. So I say that now, they're my guys, and you own all of them. And so on the flip side, those phone calls, and you know, obviously with the way media and stuff goes now, it was out quick, and not to be able to be in front of those guys was also hard, because those were my guys. But then yes, you step back, and once you make big boy decisions to come to an elite place like this, where you can recruit elite talent and develop elite talent and be around some of the best coaches in the country. Yeah, I would have sprinted out here if he told me to, instead of getting on a plane.
Obviously, the relationship with Coach Day, the tradition here at Ohio State were two main factors. How much did it help that you were a former Big Ten player yourself from Indiana, and I believe your wife is from?
Yeah, I mean, the familiarity of the Midwest, just in recruiting, was easier for me. I mean, I recruited out here at previous stops, so being in the GCL, getting into Cleveland, up there, being able to stay at my in-laws' house instead of a hotel. There was a lot of factors that go in, but absolutely, anytime you can come home, the understanding of the league, the history of this place, and you know, Ohio Stadium and the shoe and all that stuff. I mean, I just think, like I talked before, the learning curve is going to be a lot easier because it's not an unknown. It's something that I grew up and was around, and saw that.
Jim, what did
associate head coach now, offensive line coach? You guys have a run game coordinator, a pass game coordinator, an offensive coordinator, and a head coach, all with the offense. Is that an exciting challenge to try to make that all kind of come together?
Yeah, I mean, I think if you let it become a challenge, it can be. But like, we're just in there right now. I just walked out of meetings. We're just doing ball. Like, no one's wearing a shirt that has their title on it. And if Kevin says something, or Tony says something, or Brian says something, that they're not going to listen to my input. And on the flip side, right? I think with Ryan and what he's done here is we brought in a bunch of really good coaches, and so the development of your position is key, and then the development of the scheme, right? But I mean, statistically and what they've done here, like, the offense is pretty damn good. So I don't need to come in and revamp or change a bunch of things. I'm here to enhance and make those things better. And along the way, whether my business card had 3 titles or 2 or none, that's just what we're trying to do. So if you want it to be a challenge, it could be, but with these guys here, it's not going to be, because at the end of the day, we're the offensive coaches in that unit. We're just trying to get our guys better.
What Coach Day tell you?
With the offensive line, an area where they struggled at times a little bit last year. It's an area where you guys at UCLA thrive. People use your film as, you know, this is textbook how to run the football. For you, I guess, another excitement question: how exciting is it to get to work with the talent level that's here? Kind of put your stamp on what you were able to do at UCLA with the run scheme, bring it to, you know, a guy like Donder Jackson, like a Paris Johnson, like the talent that you have to work with.
Yeah.
Is that, as a coach, like, what do you see in that? Is that exciting for you?
Absolutely, because that's your number one job as a coach, is to develop your guys, right? You got to maximize each individual kid, right? So it doesn't matter which one you're talking about, to make sure they play to their ability. So yes, if I can enhance the scheme here and help those guys on 1 or 2 or 3 things from a staff, that's good. And then really just the excitement of coaching. Once again, the intimacy, I think I said it before, of coaching college football. You get to take an 18, 19-year-old kid and then watch him grow and develop him through that, getting ready for the next level. So the kids we're going to be able to recruit here, the place that this, you know, the kids that this place wants to bring in, yeah, I'm very excited for that.
What did Coach Day tell you, maybe specifically, he wanted you to address from offensive line play, Justin? I mean, more than anything else, that maybe was lacking? Was it
No,
crispness in the run game? I mean, did he? Did
No,
you get into that kind of
he
stuff?
wanted me to come in and maximize the guys, maximize the room. I mean, there was not one specifics of a D&D or a scheme or any of those things. Because once again, when you come in, like that's your job as a position coach, is first and foremost is to develop and maximize your room.
Yeah.
And so that's what he knows that he's getting with me, and that's why he brought me here. Is that that's what I need to do, is just make sure we're just enhancing these guys' tool sets and playing at a high level when we need to.
I was going to say, a person sitting from 30,000 feet looking down, well, wait a minute, they led the nation in total offense and in scoring. What needs to be fit and what needs to be enhanced and stuff? What do you see that maybe you do need to bring along a little bit from an offensive line play?
Well, I think
There were times when it looked like run defenses gave them a lot of trouble.
Yeah, I mean, I think
Specific games.
we're going to evaluate the film. You're going to watch the tape, and you're going to see things that, if it is going to be who we are and what we're about, how do you make it better? How do you enhance it? And there'll be maybe some things that you bring in, say, what, we're not going to be that as much because of the personnel, what we have in the field. You learn from that, but you move on. So that's probably a better question for me after spring ball, once I've had my hands on these guys a lot, once we've been around these guys through individual and through team settings and those things. That would be a good one to come back after spring and really see what we really are honed in on, that we got to make better, so when we get to the fall, we're ready to go.
Justin, once you were hired, it seemed like you were immediately, you went on the road representing Ohio State and things like that. Was that different for you? Like, was recruiting different knowing what was on your chest as opposed to, I don't know, like your previous jobs?
I mean, it doesn't hurt. I mean, the block O when you walk into the front door of the school, people see that. There's a little bit of, logo greed or whatever you want to say. But I mean, once again, you guys will see as you're around me more, like I'm a big fundamental basics, keeping everything simple and working the way up, right? Like football in itself is blocking and tackling. That's just how it starts. You block them, they don't tackle, you score points. Whether you throw it, you run it, however you get it, right? If you don't block them, then they're going to tackle you guy, whether it's a sack, a TFL. Now put that into recruiting. It's all about relationships. You got to identify the kids that can play for you and uphold the standard that you have here. And then how do you go get those guys, right? It's not, for me, it's not with cool Instagram edits or dancing or music or whatever that stuff is. Like, you got to go in and hit the ground running with the high school coach, with the parents, with the mentors, with whoever's helping that kid in that decision. And so, does this logo help? Absolutely. You're going after a higher caliber kid, but at the end of the day, he's still a kid. You got to go build the right way and try to, get him to want to choose here.
And obviously, you knew Ryan Day coming into this. Did that help at all, or was it kind of a trial by fire, knowing that? I mean, you had been on the job a couple weeks, and you're trying to get kids to come to play for you. Like not knowing kind of the logistics of the program entirely. I mean, what was that like?
Yeah, I mean, they made the conversations with the kids easier. Knowing what as you sell the vision of the program and you sell from the top down, then I could speak to that more because I've known Ryan for so long. So that probably helped. But still, at the end of the day, like I said, you got to go in and dig on these kids and show them who you are, what you're about, how you're going to develop them, how you're going to take care of them off the field. You talk to the parents, you talk to the coaches, and you just build it that way because it's a relationship business. If as college football has become more and more of a business, then our business is still people. And so you got to be able to work those kids and do that.
That's what I wanted to ask about, really, because if you look at like Tim, he coached with Urban Meyer, and Ryan obviously knew him, Luke Bickle with Perry, Ryan and Chip and you all together. I mean, how were those conversations when Ryan tries to call you, knowing that Chip was kind of Ryan's mentor?
Well, I mean, he did it the right way. I mean, more detailed than that, it doesn't need to be, and that's something that Ryan could go, but he's first class. He does it the right way. That's why he's a head football coach for Ohio State, right? So everything was gone about the right way through the discussions and those things, and then ultimately it was a decision that I had to make for what was best for me and my family and those things.
Being a Midwest guy, he just missed the 0 degrees. And
you know what? I had to get the dust off the cobwebs from the winter coats in the closet because we didn't need those much in Westwood, Los Angeles. But I wouldn't say I missed it, but I'm getting acclimated pretty quick.
How do you adjust to that mental shift? I mean, premier athletes and coaches, you guys all have the same kind of mentality, just attack. But you're talking about going from LA back here in the middle of winter on basically a win. How hard is that for you, for your family, just for everything that you have to do to get back here logistically?
I mean, it's a challenge. I got 4 kids and moving across the country, so the timing of that, finding the home, but those are all things that go into it. And you get into this business knowing that. I mean, I was told that and learned that a long time ago from some older coaches where they started having kids and getting in the business of it is hard. You're going to miss some of these things. You're going to be separated and do that. But, you know, once again, growing up as a Big Ten kid, like the Rose Bowl was the mecca. My father and I wake up and you'd watch the Rose Parade and you get ready to watch the sun going down over the San Gabriel Mountains in the third quarter. Like that was our world. That was the Big Ten world. Well, my office for the last 4 years was the Rose Bowl in Pasadena. So my kids got to go out pre-game and post-game and throw the ball around and dance around. Like they thought that was normal, right? Now here, coming here, their pre-game are going to be down on the field at the Horseshoe, right? And Ohio Stadium, where their classmates would kill to do that, or they once a year they get to go to a game, and like that's normal for them. So there's give and take to everything. So yeah, in the heat of it now, yeah, I miss my kids. I wish I was around them, but we've presented that as a family, and my wife and I to the kids like this is our adventure. Like this is what we do, and here's why it's going to be this way. But we get it. You know, Santa Claus comes to the bowl games a lot. My kids don't know that Santa Claus comes to the house. They're what hotels he visited and make sure he can get there because it's just what we do.
Justin, OSU's been a pretty heavy stretch run team the last few years. It seems like you guys at UCLA have a pretty diverse run game with Chip there. Is there any talk with Ryan coming in here about helping diversify things a little bit on that end?
We're going through cut-ups and watching stuff now. Like I said, that's really more personnel driven. So what your guys do well and how you can put them in the most opportune position to do that. I mean, my book of work, I've been able to do 22 personnel to 23. I mean, when Ryan and I were together at Boston College, we lined up with Andre Williams and we had 3 tight ends, a fullback, and a tailback on the field and at the 50-yard line. So people would line up in goal line defense, but that's who we had and what we did, and so we got really good at that. So, you know, that's a long-winded way to say, you know, not really a specific thing. It's just going to be a matter of seeing what we have, what they do well, and then how do we maximize that, window dress that, and whatever the case may be, getting into that new head.
What's the difference between trying to maximize your personnel but also stick to an identity? I mean, you and Ryan obviously want to establish an identity, but you don't want to do things that your personnel won't allow. He's talking about stretch versus gaps. You did a lot of different things at UCLA. How do you kind of balance that as an offensive mind to not just work with your personnel, but also make sure that you're being true to yourself and your identity and not just doing what you do?
Yeah, I mean, your identity becomes, though, what those kids can do really well. So same deal. I mean, you get through spring ball and find out how these kids run, how they pull, how they, whatever they do, how they change direction and some of the things that you do. Then you start to hang your hat on, we can do this, and here's how we can, like I said, window dress it a couple different ways. So, you know, you're really running the same stuff on 2, but is it formationally different? Is it unbalanced? Is it with a different personnel in the game? But for those 5-6 guys up front, it is who you are, right? And so that's the fine line you always teeter with, because you can't, you know, if you're a jack of all, you're a master at none, right? You don't get really good at anything, but you can't just pigeonhole yourself as well and be this all the time when you need a little variation. So that's as you go through spring, as we go through our cut-ups, we'll find out really where we need to head and what we're going to be.
What did 4 years under Chip sort of teach you about designing a running game?
The word no doesn't exist. You can say, whoa, let's look at it. But kind of going back to the question you just had, like, well, that's not who we are, that's not what we do, so we're not going to do that. Well, then you can maybe get caught a little short that way. So the best thing about working with him was that in the run game and the throw game and protections of, let's take a look at it. Can we make it efficient enough for us, or can we make it who we are? Now, it wasn't always finalized like, yeah, we're going to do that, but there was never an ironclad of like, no, we don't do that. Let's see, let's look at it, let's talk through it, let's twist it a little more so it becomes more like what we do, but there's still a wrinkle here.
What do you think it'll be like going from working with Chip to another guy who was sort of there at the beginning of the spread offense with Kevin Wilson?
Awesome. You know, I mean, I don't think Kevin's ever been around a bad offense, you know, in his tenure. So that's the beautiful part about this game, is you start getting coaches and those guys, you know, working together. And, you know, it's a good little recipe. And then obviously through the vision of what Ryan wants to do, of, you know, cooking it up and putting it out that way. So just in a short time being around Kev and all these guys, you know, we're in there with Kev and Tony and even Brian and Corey and those guys diving in, and everybody's talking their area of expertise within that play. You know, it's exciting because you know, be able to come in and supplement that.
Justin, when you talk about a clean slate going into spring and not forming evaluations maybe off of last year, what would be your philosophy and how that shakes out, what do you want to see in these practices? Because last year there's a debate about this guy's a tackle or guard, or just the 5 best? And those maybe seem like they should be the same thing, but they're not.
Yeah, I think it'll shake itself out. But you go into spring, what do you look for? You see how a kid competes. You see how he thrives when there's a little adversity. I mean, all these things sound a little cliche, but they're cliches for a reason because it happens, right?
Yeah.
So however you want to put that. So getting into spring ball, yeah. How is a guy from individual to a partial team deal, from a partial team deal to when the lights are on, right? How does he play in that situation? Who is he next to? Is this guy, when he has these reps, look pretty good next to this guy, and then this one, when he's more on his own, not as good. So you start to kind of, massage through that and figure that out. But that's the best part about this game, honestly, is like the best players show themselves, right? So whoever those 5 best are, they're gonna rear their head pretty quick, and then how do you accelerate their growth? That's our job as a coach.
Do you want to just find your best 5 guys and they're kind of out there? Like, are you open to the idea of rotating guys in the offensive line?
I mean, yeah, in a perfect world, you'd love to say these are the 5 and they go the whole time. But injuries, I mean, I've never is a long time, but I've never had a season where the same 5 guys stayed the whole time. There's injuries, there's matchups, there's things that go along that way. So you want to create as much depth and as many game-ready guys as you can. So we'll find that out as we keep moving ahead too.
When you do evaluate offensive linemen on the recruiting trail, I know it's a lot different because they're growing a lot more than everybody else in the world, but are you looking more for guys who are versatile, you can kind of put them anywhere? Do you want guys where it's like, I want him to be a left tackle here, I want him to be a
there's certain size. I mean, you're not going to take a 6'2" or a 6'3" guy and say, oh, this guy's a tackle, right? I mean, he would be more of an inside guy, but we've always evaluated off, and I didn't make it up. It's just, it's kind of been time tested, but just looking at base, bend, balance, and burst. And if a kid owns those, how high is he on those scales? And then, what can you develop? Because I've taken 239-pound kids out of high school and been first rounders, and I've signed kids that were 315 out of high school, and they started for 4 years and went to play pro football too. So they're going to come in all different shapes and sizes out of high school. You really have to be able to project and look at those guys based off their skill set.
What's the value of having a second-year center for a first-year offensive line coach?
I mean, anytime a guy's taking, more reps in the batting cage, the game is going to slow down for that guy, right? Coming in and new terminology, or what call was this, what call is that, why did we ID this, to be able to go to the guy that did it and look at that, it's going to be helpful.
When you look at, I'm sure you watched a little bit of film, when you look at a guy like Luke and the way that he played last year as a first-year starter at center, how much stock do you put into that and starting to build out, focus on all 5 guys, or you're trying to implement a new scheme? You've got a guy who is supposed to be the leader of the offensive line who's already played a year. Like how do you evaluate where he is in his development as a second-year center for a first-year offensive line?
Yeah, I mean, for all those guys, you put them all, when they're all in the room with you and you're watching film and you're communicating and you're talking, you just kind of grow and get a pretty good feel. I've done it long enough now where there's a pretty good temperature gauge once you've been around a guy and talked to the guys enough. So for Luke, for all of them, the guys that played and the guys that kind of played a little bit, we get them in the meeting rooms in a little bit, position-specific conditioning leading up to spring ball. And then once you get to spring ball, you start from the basics, you reinstall, and then you just see how fast those guys accelerate. But yeah, it's not, for all those guys that played before, when you're watching a cut up and say, why did you do this? What was your thought? What was there? And then you can either, once again, enhance that or you can correct that. So having more veteran guys, obviously is easier. And then for me, I would just use them more for, verbiage and calls and things like that, adjusting to it. Because, as I've said before, it's blocking and tackling, right? So blocking is blocking. Call it this block, that block, or this block. Us two got to block those 2 guys. How do we get that done and how do we get that communicated? Just kind of go from there.
What do you think are the things that maybe you learned at UCLA that you might be able to bring here and help implement this offense?
That's a really good question. Like I said, I think just what I learned talking from Chip, but enhance. I don't need to come in here and reinvent the wheel. Offense here is really damn good, right? So it's my job to come in and supplement that. I just being a coordinator there and not just a line guy. Coming here, being able to speak language and talk about the perimeter, talk about the outside, talk about how this play action really sets up with this run, which gives this concept of openness. I think the experience of being a coordinator and running the room that way is really going to help beneficial to these guys here because we're looking at the big picture together and not just living in the box.
Is that weird at all to go from being a coordinator to now being more focused on the line?
No, the job's the job. You take over your room, you make your kids great, and you try to enhance the place you're at so you can play the championships and win. So not like I said, I'm not hung up on titles. I'm hung up on winning and losing. Anything I can do to help these guys make sure that we win here, that's really what I'm focused on and all about.
How much does it make the transition easier that you've already worked with Ryan and that you kind of know how jumble works?
Yeah, well, I mean, very. The learning curve is smaller, right? If he says something or his mindset or what's important to him, and just seeing the way he goes about things. Been there, done that, seen it before. So I think it's just an easier bridge of getting back into the groove and building the program and the room and everything through his vision and what he's wanted, and it's making it easier.
I assume you might have already been asked this, but initial reaction to DeJuan Jones, is that the biggest lineman you?
Yeah, some of the door frames aren't big enough for him. When he walks through, he's got to duck his head and bouncing around, but he's a large human.
But as an offensive line coach,